Good evening, St. Louis, and welcome into this City Central postgame. And this one's not going to be anywhere near as positive as the last one because that was an unfortunate game. Kind of expected it as we went into it, but anyhow, just got to face what it was. St. Louis City SC dominated in San Diego. They fall 2-0. San Diego scores early in the first few minutes of the game. They take a 1-0 lead. They dominate the first 20 or 30 minutes, about the first 20 minutes, let's call it, first 15, really. City plays a really solid back end of the first half. Then we go to the second half, and there's little blips on the screen relative to what City started doing in the second half, but it added up to almost nothing. It just wasn't a good game at all. They were disconnected from the get-go. I'll bring up some great stats and some great visuals. Some guys who put together this great app on Streamlit called Insight 90, Adnan 433, and Sahil GDWN. They put together these great passing network and things like that. We'll take a look at some of these things throughout the post-game show to kind of illustrate some of the things we're going to talk about here, because you can look over here. City's going to be in the blue over here on the right, and just nowhere near the passing network we saw last week from St. Louis City SC. I mean, last week Rafael Santos and was able to connect pretty consistently with that left side attack, and we saw it. The one good attack St. Louis City SC had tonight that Simon Bescher inexplicably could not put away. And I know he talks about it. I talk about it. The numbers eventually say it's going to be keep coming, but I mean, this is a guy who's got the yips. I mean, at this point, I can't get away from it. The guy's got the yips. And so to see not nearly, because the thickness and the color of the line dictates how many passes there were. So to see that St. Louis City never really got anything going on the left side of this buildup over here is very, very disturbing, considering that was their best attack. Was Miggy taking it up the field. He dishes it out to Santos, who's always high and wide. He works it back inside to Miggy, and then one of the sixes is crashing the box. And that six in that situation was Chris Durkin. And you can just see Daniel Edelman and Chris Durkin, the majority of the game, their average positioning comes in on their own half. If you go back and you look at all the numbers from that game against Charlotte, even though it was a very disappointing draw, all those numbers against Charlotte had a team that was playing the majority of the game in Charlotte's half. And when you're going up against San Diego, they're a very good team. You're not going to be able to play that kind of game. But to not see a little bit more offensive punch from St. Louis City SC, to see them get doubled up in passes, 365 to 722, and also not only have less passes, be less accurate by 6%, they just got absolutely worked in so many ways possible. They got absolutely worked. This is, again, the City Central postgame. We're brought here by our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook, where the crown is yours, and our friends at Home Bank will tell you more about each of them here as we go through the show. If you want to jump into the chat, question, comments, obviously it wasn't a very fun game to watch. People aren't very happy about how this season's already shaping up. 1 point through 2 games, a draw and a loss, just 1 goal scored for St. Louis City SC through far this season, and not a ton of the players looking that great. You have questions, you have comments, you have complaints. Go ahead and get those in the chat. Here's eggplant emoji. He's jumping in early, and he says, it went about as expected. That said, I think Leuven, Hartle, and a decent striker make this a playoff team. Listen, I don't want to go full Jim Moore on you, but that's a little bit of a jump for me. You did kind of hone in on what I think is the big thing, which is, I mean, no Marcel Hartle, no Edward Leuven against top teams like San Diego FC. I don't think this roster has a chance. It's just so many opportunities where they played good soccer. They did what they were supposed to do, especially after the first 15 minutes. They were able to eat some of the pressure and get the ball out, start counterattacks consistently. It's just that when you're starting counterattacks, and it's guys who are usually going to be backups, who are going to be in different roles, i.e. Miggy Perez or Chris Durkin or Daniel Edelman, depending on how it goes. Durkin actually had a pretty solid game in a lot of ways. I wouldn't be surprised if Leuven was back next week, if Edelman was the one who was coming off the bench. I wouldn't bet on it, but it wouldn't surprise me. but there's a lot of moments where Durkin found space, and the back line did a good job of finding Durkin in space. It's just that Chris Durkin is a solid player. Edward Leuven is a great one. And that's the difference. That's just the facts. And Miggy Perez had a solid game in a lot of moments. But if that's Marcel Hartle using those same moments, just go back and watch how effective Marcel Hartle was in the Charlotte game. And so, yeah, I mean, right now it just feels like right off the bat, this roster isn't one of the top rosters in the MLS. We can all just be honest about that. We don't need to fudge that at all. It's not one of the top rosters in the MLS when it's fully healthy. And right now, without Edward Leuven, without Marcel Hartle, it's far from healthy right now. And that's or far from full, I guess we should say, because neither player are actually out for injuries. They're out for completely other legitimate reasons, but they are out. And that's the fact of what we had to watch tonight. And that was an offense that just couldn't really get anything going. We're going to take a look here. Final third entries. They were getting absolutely creamed in it. It was 31 final third entries to 11 in the first half. And I just think final third entries, I think we could all agree, it's a pretty good way of looking at how good your offense is. Unless your entire game is eating a ton of pressure in a low block and then getting counterattacks. Obviously, you're playing a game where you want to get like 10 final third entries and you just got to buy one or two of them in the back of the net. But City's not trying to play that way, even against the San Diego team that's trying to control a lot. City couldn't just sit back and only win on counterattacks and press. It turned out that was going to be the only thing they did. But yeah, the final thirds was, this was bad. Let's get this up here on the screen for everybody to see, because the final third numbers, and again, this is a great little Streamlit app called Insight 90 that incredibly gets all these little graphics up on their site kind of like as the game is going. So here's another one that we can look at. These are the final third entries. Again, City's on the right in blue. I can probably change that considering they don't really wear a lot of blue. We can make it gold. And you can just see, I mean, just look at the glut of final third entries that San Diego's getting all on the right side there. Maybe that's a reason why Rafael Santos got taken out in the first half in that they ran all over him. Let's take a look how different it was on that right side of San Diego's offense, because that's another thing we're going to talk about here is going to be the lineup, because I know a lot of people with Miggy Perez getting the start, with Marcel Hartle out a lot. I know a lot of people had a lot of questions. I mean, they took a lot. They had 20 of their 32 final third entries in the first half were down their right side against City's left side. In the second half of their, it's going to be a slightly smaller number. Of their 27, 20 of them came from the right side. So putting Vollum over there and changing things didn't really do anything. Taking out Rafael Santos, obviously putting in Thomas Totland was unfortunate because he got hit with an injury on when he was playing over on City's right side against the left side. And you can see it here. They didn't really attack down this left side offensively really much at all for San Diego. And then City, a little bit more balanced, but also it's sparse. Fair amount of carries. A lot of these are Rafael Santos in the first half down this left side. So it's just a team that got dominated. And San Diego's really good. And I'm sure there's a lot of City fans out there who it's a bummer to see a sophomore club be so successful, because City obviously couldn't replicate what they were able to do in the first season. And that's been kind of a bummer. Let's get to more of the chats. Amy Murr, missing Hartle for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's obvious. I understand why, to a point, why DeMay went with Miggy Perez in that other 10 spot. You want a connector. The way it's supposed to work is the striker does all kind of striker things. Does some hold up play, but gets behind the line. That right 10 is really trying to bust ass and break lines a lot. That's why it's Sang-Min Jean. That's why it's sometimes Brandon McSorley. I thought it might be a little bit more Makai Joyner. I've been wrong about that. And then that other 10 kind of is the connector between the midfield and the wide players to those two more forward-centric players in the 3-4-2-1 of the 2 and the 1. They need a connector there. And so I get why he goes with Perez because he's more of a midfielder, he's more of a connector, and he had a solid game. But when you then see guys like Cedric Toyshirt or even Celio Pompeu come in the second half and have some pretty solid runs, I think there's reason why people are going to question the lineup, and that's completely fair. Abo City fan says, in the face of the talent gap City is going to frequently face, can you explain why they're hoarding a league-leading amount of GAM? Because I can't. It might, it's hard to get deals done sometimes. That's the deal with you're trying to get like the cash trade done inside the league with the GAM. You got to make a deal happen. That can be tricky sometimes, especially during a season in a league where a lot of teams go to the playoffs, and so I don't know how many teams go into seasons thinking we're completely out of it. I think they're going to make a move in the summer because they have so much GAM, because the club keeps talking a big game, and eventually they're going to have to put some money behind that. I expect them to spend some money on a striker because it's just so obvious when you watch this team how they just need attacking punch. And if Makai Joyner's not going to be a piece off the bench this year, that changes how we have to view why they haven't gone for that attacking punch. Because if that's where all your talent, if that's where your best young players coming up, that's the position he's going to play. Maybe you're like, okay, we don't want to overspend there and block that guy. But if he's not going to be part of the team, then that's a completely moot point. And I'll admit I'm wrong about that one. I'm wrong about that one. And having a little positivity about a young player, it's one thing you can do when you know the team's not going to be a playoff team. But I probably overlooked that one, and they desperately need to make a move in the attack. I mean, they still have time. The window's not closed. I know they're making the Cordova move, and so I guess with the roster set as it is, they can't really make a move, but they got to do something in the next 6 months because this attack needs punch. Is Cordova the guy? I'll be surprised. I'll be dead shocked if they actually pay $2.5 million for him, as it was reported. I think he's going to be here for whatever 10 or 11 games once he actually gets his visa and gets incorporated into the squad and things like that. I don't have a lot of expectations for that move. He's a solid player in the MLS, but it takes you a little bit to get it incorporated. What does the City offense look like? How many chances is it creating? Maybe if he's in the lineup, he has a goal tonight. Who knows? Eggplant emoji, when does Falou Fall return? He is running at practice as of this past week, but he hasn't really been incorporated yet into the workouts and the drills and stuff. So I would wonder if the target is to get him on the field with the players this week. And if not, that's kind of the next step up. He's running already on his own. He's just got to start getting in drills, and then they can start dialing him in. One player we didn't see was Mamadou Mbake, who obviously isn't going by fall. He was on the bench tonight. Would have been nice to see him. Not surprised we didn't. They're going to play it safe, and as soon as you're down like that, there's no need to risk it. I know it'd be nice to get him some completely stress-free minutes when the game's kind of out of hand and you're not calling on him to run his ass off and tie the game up or win the game or what have you. But play it safe with him. They lost another player potentially to injury in Totland. I know a lot of people aren't happy with the injury situation. How could you be? So yeah, just play it safe with Mamadou Mbake, and then eventually Falou Fall will get there. Hopefully they can figure out the center back duo. I thought Orozco had another solid game. I thought Polvara had a couple of moments where he was really bad. I thought he had a couple of moments where it showed that his passing and his movement's a useful thing to have in this back three system. But it's going to be nice to get the fullbacks in, the correct center backs in there, the starters eventually. And that'll be interesting to see if Polvara then plays a little defensive midi, or if Orozco, is playing some backup wing back, kind of like he had to tonight when Totland went down. It'll be interesting to see how the fallout positively goes once the center backs, Mamadou Mbake and Falou Fall, are both back. And again, Mamadou Mbake should be, I guess, make his debut this next week, while I think Falou Fall is at least 2 weeks away from making his debut. Thomas Welch says STL Sports have collectively going to make me lose my hair by August. Yeah, they did a similar thing to you last year, but unfortunately, that one was happy. That was when the Blues went on a playoff run and Thomas shaved his head, and we were all happy and thought the Blues were going to be a really good team. Ooh, that did not go well. Still not going too well. Hey, they won tonight. Anyhow, it's not great. Mizzou basketball is good. So SLU basketball, obviously. So's the Illini. Just keep rolling on with all that basketball, guys. We keep talking about it here on STL Sports Central. We'll obviously keep talking City here, but it just isn't the most positive conversation right now. And that's been kind of a bummer. And Swifty says it as well. Thank God for Mizzou and Billikens. Otherwise, it would be awful. Also, Matt, with an ownership who has built a stadium and paid an expansion fee, I don't know if this club has an extra $5 million around to get another piece. I think they do. They only lost. I think they saw the report where they lost like $4 million last year. That's not bad. That's not bad in this league. That's not bad. They can take it. They got the GAM. They can make the moves inside the league. They got the Garber bucks. That's not an excuse. Listen, that is a perfectly valid reason why a Sargent move was never going to happen. I've used this reason why expecting them to pay $8 or $10 million for attackers last year was probably pushing it. They made some smart moves, $4 million for Falu Fall. They've made some really good moves this year, in really cheap moves. And Mamadou Mbake they got just for a future fee. Polvara for cheap, Edelman for cheap. A $6 million attacker makes sense right now. That's completely reasonable. Expecting this team as they continue to fill out the arena, the stadium, I should say, as they sign Energizer Park a naming rights deal, it's completely reasonable to expect this team to increase their spending a reasonable amount. And that's been my point this entire time is as they make sales of players, i.e. João Klaus, they need to turn that money around and spend it. And so them spending around $5 or $6 million last year with the big bump being Falu Fall, them spending a few $1 million this year to bring in a couple of these players, they need to make a continually bigger punch is if they're going to keep backing up what they're saying. And they keep talking about being a winning team. And you have to spend money to be a winning team. That's just the fact of the matter. Look all around the MLS. I'm not saying you have to spend like these teams have. I'm not saying you need to spend $11.5 million for an Evander or 14 for Danke or whatever the hell it was, or the obnoxious fee for Josh Sargent just because he's from here. I'm not saying they need to do that, but they do need to spend $5 or $6 million on a quality attacker who can put things away when guys like Miggy of all people are putting him on a plate like that. That could have been a big moment. He had it again. Miggy, we're going to criticize that moment because the attack wasn't good, but the fact that Miggy at 20 years old can create that in that moment alongside Santos and Durkin, I think that's an impressive thing from Miggy. It'd be really nice if that could have gotten finished. Be a lot more fun conversation to have right now. Thomas Welsh, how has San Diego soared high in its early time as an expansion team? Well, City did begin and then fell off a cliff. I think it's GM. I think it's GM moves and team building. They're without Chucky Lozano, and they are still a great team. Andres Dreyer is a big move, and that's also an ownership group that because they're playing in a bad stadium, hence why we didn't get to see the goal we saw. I'm trying to think what exactly the San Diego State are they building their own one right now? Are they building their own stadium right now? They got to be building a new stadium. They're not going to be in just Snapdragon the whole time, are they? I'm trying to think about this right now because it's not an unreasonable comparison to talk about the City building everything they've done and San Diego's playing in Snapdragon Stadium, which is a terrible stadium. And that's why there was a bunch of technical issues on the broadcast tonight. And so, they spend like $15 million on Dreyer, whereas City's big moves is $3 or $4 million on João Klaus. they set the bar a little bit higher, but I think there's a reason why that we can be a little bit reasonable here, which is have they poured in 400 million for a new stadium yet? They paid for some improvements at Snapdragon, but I'm not seeing them putting $400 million down for a stadium right now. And so they poured a lot more money into the roster. That's just the fact we got to look at right now. But I think if we look at this bigger picture, and I think you of all people, Thomas, thank you, Swifty, for backing that up. I was Googling as I'm trying to host. They're going to be in Snapdragon for the foreseeable future. No plans to build a new one. That's what I figured when I saw this. I think they might have built a performance center, but still, I mean, City did that, and you saw them drop the special on it. I mean, it's unbelievable everything that City built. And let's talk about this as a greater thing. We can, if you want to take everything that this ownership group says about being part of the city as a larger thing, if you want to take all of that and call it bullshit, you can do that. That's completely fair. I understand that point of view. But if you don't look at it from that perspective, you buy into what they're saying, then it is more about just wins right out of the gate. It is about the city complex and the training complex being right there and bringing in tourists because they got the Peachtree in and things like that. While that might cost you some things in the long run, and it appears it has, i.e. the World Cup stuff, it gets you things like the Olympics, and they're buying up spaces down there, and they're going to keep building stuff. They're going to keep building fields, and God willing, that means the game continues to reach out to more people in St. Louis, and more communities get access, and more kids get access, and then the academy's better, and then you don't have to worry about spending $15 million on a striker because guys like Josh Sargent never touch anywhere else but St. Louis fields and wear St. Louis jerseys until you sell them for $20 million, and then balls rolling. Like that's a completely reasonable, I think, view to buy into. And I think that's what St. Louis City that would be their huge plan if they had to go kind of positive, wide angle lens view. That would be the plan because that's what they're doing. They're buying up space, they're building new fields, and hopefully that means guys like Eddie Niles and players like that just continue to be not only go through the system, but they go through the system with the best training fields, the best coaching, the best staffs around them, what have you, technical directors, tactical coaches, and things like that. That's a great way to go forward. Some people aren't going to buy into that, and that is completely reasonable. You're just going to want to buy in when they're winning games down the road, and that's fine. That's why people are sports fans. That's why you should just buy in down the road. But there is a tangible difference, I think, why it's different what we're seeing in San Diego and what they're doing in St. Louis City. And again, they might fumble the bag completely. They might build all these soccer fields, and they might completely screw up their outreach to the community. You know, they might make mistakes like they made early on in the going when certain people were in charge that maybe didn't know how to reach out to a Midwest city the way they could and things like that. But clearly, when you look at the City 2 roster, there's a wider philosophy that is permeating from the front office down to the sporting department on there being a long-term building process that accentuates academy building and hopefully the business aspect of this, which is, again, them buying properties, developing new properties, building the things that are going to make tourism and tournaments. I'm sure at some point we're going to see them get tournaments that rake in that cottage industry, youth sports money. So they can do all of that, but that can also feed into the sporting aspect. And that's why I think soccer's such an interesting sport. As someone who didn't play it as a kid, because I didn't like it when I was little, and then I got fat and didn't want to run that much. As someone who didn't like playing it as a kid and got into it late, one of the reasons I got into it is because I think it's a fascinating way that it builds through the community and how you can literally just be a city like St. Louis and have a bunch of kids who are, you know, really good at it from young, who aren't jaded and fat like I was, who are actually good at soccer, and then you can just build it up from this grassroots thing. I think that's a beautiful thing about the sport. I think it's one of the coolest things about soccer at a global level. And I'm kind of excited that that's the way that City wants to look at it. If we were just going to be a mercenary club that spent a lot of money, yeah, it'd be fun, but I think it'd be ruined. It'd be missing maybe one of the best aspects of global soccer, and also, and it wouldn't be it wouldn't have the buy-in in the community. And again, you might not buy into this. You might never want to go to the city outside of city events. But it's important too if we talk about St. Louis as a whole, having business people who are going to buy in, spend money, and improve areas downtown. That's important. I've been a city resident my entire life outside of college and a couple of years in Afton. I love the city, and I hate that downtown's boring as shit. It sucks, especially now that I'm in my 30s. I grew up and I had cousins who talked about Laclede's Landing, and I had cousins who talked about living on Wash Ave and things like that. And those were special, really cool things, and I never really got to experience that. So seeing a team that isn't just going to be about the soccer, there's also a wider opportunity. Some people are never going to buy into that because they just care about the sport, and I will never begrudge them of that. But I can't help but be interested in the wider aspect of things because it's where I've lived my entire life. It's probably where I'm going to live the majority of my life. Iowa City fan says there is no God-given right for that academy to produce talent at an FC Dallas or Philadelphia level, and even those teams have to bring in outsourced talents. They need to be buying time for the academy to come good. That's fine, but I think it's a pretty factual thing at this point that the areas at St. Louis and the areas around St. Louis produce a pretty fair amount of American talent. And I think you could also argue that there's plenty of other talent that has been under-scouted in this area from certain areas that don't have that financial power to play at some of the academies that have been around St. Louis when pay-to-play was a thing. And when you already see that they have one of the top U15 players, when you already see that a City 2 roster that's starting to produce talent, in the mid-teens and upper teens, I think it's pretty fair to guess that this talent pipeline that has been pretty consistent even before there was this amount of academy stuff that isn't tied to pay to play. I don't think it's ridiculous to think that this market will continue to produce talent. And yeah, they do have to buy some time for the academy to come good. It would have been nice after that first year if they would have decided to maybe take some of that money, invest it onto the pitch, and spend a little cash. But that was, I think, more of a philosophical difference between people who were running the club at a sporting level and things like that. I think we're going to see a more aggressive spending policy under this group. But I also think we're going to see a team that isn't going to jump the gun on moves. That's why the Sergi Cordova the loan move for Cordova is a great example. It buys them time. It gets them the player in-house. It potentially improves their depth, potentially improves their ceiling. Obviously, it should up their floor a little bit. It gives them a few months to look at that player and see what he does. And it gives them a buy option depending on what kind of production. And if not, then you punt out there. And to your point earlier in the chat, they have a ton of GAM, depending on how much the roster costs them. And to buy down certain people's numbers, they probably still have 6-7 million, scraping around there somewhere. They got the Klaus money as well. I expect them to make a move. They made a lot of moves this summer, very cheap moves. A lot of them were smart, in my opinion. I think Polvar is a solid player, even if they are playing him a little out of position, and he made a big mistake on the second goal tonight. I like what we've seen from Daniel Edelman. He's a young player. He's a veteran already in the MLS. He's trying to get better. He has sights on playing in Europe. Tyler Adams is kind of the player he wishes he can be. He's not that yet. Good defender, solid passer, and he's trying to get better in that respect. Mbaka is I think a fantastic move. They just need to get him on the pitch, and hopefully they will next week. But they need to spend more money, and it's so obvious where they have to spend more money. No one's guessing where the next big purchase needs to be. They figured out some depth in the midfield. It's going to be interesting to see how it looks when Leuven comes back. Can't wait to see who wins out between Durkin and Edelman. They figured out some depth at center back. Hopefully they figured out the talent aspect as well with Fall and Ibaka. They obviously, I think, have gotten better at the wingback spots. It wasn't super obvious tonight, but I think Vollum, Totlin, and Santos is a good three-man team at those two wingback spots. Of course, if the Totlin's hurt, that kind of sucks. Speaking of wingback depth inside of this organization, thoughts out to Owen Jorgensen, the City 2 player, who broke his arm early on in the City 2 game yesterday. That's a big bummer. He's a player right side along Alex Junt and Eddie Niles, who's one of the most talented players in the entire City system and one of the top players in his age group. And see him go down when he was prepped for a season where he was going to get a lot of minutes as Critchley's playing this DeMay system for City 2. That was a big bummer to see two wingbacks go down for the City system in 2 days, in a day like that, really about 24 hours. That's been a big bummer as well. Let's get another chat in here as well. My biggest issue with what they have failed to do is not bring Ream back, whereas Matt says we don't need Ream. Hey, listen, you might be mad they haven't brought Tim Ream, but can we at least give them credit for bringing in players like Ream, lanky center backs with a wide passing range, who are willing to take a shot, who are willing to dribble in possession, to take a midfielder out of position and then kind of make that extra pass that needs to be made. That's what is great about St. Louis center backs, I think. That's what's great about a St. Louis style that's been coached at all these academies around town. I think Mamadou Mbake and Falou Fall, they might not be Tim Ream, but they're St. Louis center backs, in my opinion. Those guys are really potentially cerebral players. They're risky, but I think they're legitimately cerebral players. Thomas Welsh says, like you said about Miggy, I think a lot of players' games start to look a lot better if you start finishing a lot of goals with a certified striker who's clinical around the net. Yeah, that's the important part. Like, we got to give Miggy credit for that play. Just because Bescher inexplicably could not finish that one, we have to give Miggy credit for that way. We have to give credit for that buildup right now, because while obviously we looked earlier at the passing network, and I'll bring it up again if people weren't here for that, and these are, again, done a great job by some people who put together a Streamlit app called Insight 90. And you can see here there's just nothing consistent going up the left side for City over here in blue, and that's one of the best attacks. Santos to Miggy, to Durkin, or to Bescher actually was one of the best attacks. And we saw it last week against Charlotte. That's something that's consistently been open. We saw it in the preseason as well. Santos plays super high and wide. You can see number 20 there. He's the only one out of the starting 11 who is really playing outside the average little space they have there, shaded over in the middle. Look how high he's playing there. Volum's playing pretty high as well. He's playing super high here, so he's always going to get out and up to the left. That's always where Santos is going to be. Usually he's going to be wider than the attacking 10 on that side. That's usually Marcel Hartle. Today it's Miggy Perez. So a lot of the times he gets out wide, whether it's a 3-man back or a 4-man back. It usually pulls one of the defenders super out wide, out of position with Rafael Santos. That opens up that little channel there. Marcel Hartle lives in that channel in any system, especially in this system. So that's where Hartle goes. That's where Perez was today. And then what they have right now, and this is kind of the weak point in the system, considering the current personnel, is then the sixes are bombarding towards the box. And what usually happens is, because you pulled out one guy with the fullback, Santos, you pulled another guy out of position to cover the channel with Hartle. Now the box is wide open. And so the pass from Hartle over to the crashing 6 has been to Chris Durkin. And again, Chris Durkin's had a solid game. But who do you want at the top of the box? Chris Durkin or Edward Leuven? We're all answering the same thing. We're all screaming at the camera right now. We're all picking Edward Leuven if that's the player you want at the box. He's not in there right now, and so that's Durkin at the top of the box. It's not what you want. And today, in that sequence, instead of going to Durkin, Miggy had a great pass, or Miggy went to Durkin, made another run. Durkin did make a great pass, and then Miggy got it to Bescher. Maybe if Cordova's in there, maybe it's a goal. So that attack was really solid, and it's one of the few replicable plays we've seen from St. Louis City this season. Why couldn't they get to it more consistently? Why is this passing map so barren over on this left side? I'm not sure, and maybe that's why we saw the change. Maybe Yohan DeMay didn't think Rafael Santos could keep up with the defensive pressure that San Diego was giving down the left side defensively. So we wanted to put Volum over there, maybe get more of a balance. Volum can cover better defensively, but he can also create that left side offense that he wasn't going to get. And it seemed like they were giving him the right side. So put Totland over there, make things happen. I'm not sure if that's exactly what DeMay was thinking. I'm trying to think about that. And let's go back to the lineup while we're talking about DeMay's thinking. A lot of people chatting about the decision to start Miggy. I thought Miggy had a really solid game. I really did. I thought he was fine. Let's use this Insight 90 app and pull up Miggy's player card for the game. I thought Miggy was fine today, but said he really did a good job adding some punch to this attack late in the game. Celio Pompeu, I thought, did a good job adding some punch late in this game. And it'd be interesting to see what the game would have looked like had one of those players started instead of Miggy. I'm not sure. I thought he had a solid game. He's 20 years old, and it's crazy how many people last year just given up on the guy. He scores the early goal. He's everyone loves him in St. Louis City as the hometown hero. And then because he falls apart a little, or because he falls out of everyone's conversation a little bit, people were really down on Miggy Perez. And I thought he had a solid game tonight. 13 of 15 on passes, 2 progressive passes, 2 chances created, including 1 big chance created. He had 6 final third passes. 5 of them were completed. Passes into the penalty box, 1 for 1. That's pretty good on the passing numbers for Miggy Perez. Had a progressive carry, a carry that led to a shot, a carry into the final third. That's the play we were just talking about earlier. I mean, that's pretty solid. He covered exactly the amount of ground you would expect him to. Again, he's not Marcel Hartle, so obviously they still lost something there from him, but he's not the reason they lost this game. Defense was uncoordinated. That first goal, you can pin that on an issue that City's had going back to, oh God, Thomas, you can help me with this one. It's going back to Bradley Carnell late in the first season, which the press is super high. The 2 6s get super high. Then they turn the ball over, or they fail to win the press, and the team's able to escape the ball out of the pressure. And then all of a sudden the 6s are super high. There's 5 or 6 City players trying to get the ball. No one's playing defense. They play a quick ball down the other side, and a talented team will score every time. That first goal was 100% on the 6s. But at the same time, maybe we chalk that one up to the system, because maybe at that moment, that midfield press just wasn't a smart move early on against San Diego when they're trying to feel them out. The press at times was solid, though, and that's the tricky part in trying to blame things, because so much of this game that looked good for City, especially later in the first, was the press, and yet it is undeniably the thing that bit them in the ass right off the bat and lost them the game. There's also Polvara with a bad step up that also gave them the second goal and took this one out of place. Polvara is an interesting character because it's just, I mean, he's playing his 3rd or 4th real game at center back in his entire career. And I talked to him this past week, and he's admitting that, he's still got a mindset of a defensive midfielder at times. And I think that can be a useful thing in this system. DeMay wants his wide center backs. That's why we talked about Mbake and Fall a minute ago. He wants his center backs to take some risks, try some passes, carry the ball, and try to get the defense out of the midfield and things like that. He had a really good game as a passer, 4 progressive passes. That's a fantastic number for a wide center back. Just for information's sake, progressive passes only count in the forward 60% of the field. So we got a wide center back who's getting passes that are working forward and creating attacks forward 4 different times in the game. You like to see that, and he was all over defensively. He had a lot of ball recoveries, 6 clearances, won both of his aerial duels, had a couple pass blocks as well. but he did have that absolutely criminal step up, trying to take a ball away from Dreyer. Dreyer somehow stays on his feet, dribbles right through him, and then finds Ingvartsen right through. And you can see Daniel Polvara busting ass in a very impressive manner, trying to stop Ingvartsen. But the bottom line is Polvara made a step up that was probably more reminiscent of what he would have done as a defensive midfielder than as a center back. And it cost St. Louis City XC. This is a team that told us they were not going to be 100% locked into what they wanted to do yet. They were still dialing in different things. They don't have their 100% roster. They are at least 4 players short of their 100% roster, especially from tonight. Edward Leuven, Marcel Hartl, Falou Fall, Mamadou Mbake. They're 4 players from their projected starting lineup. We're not seeing the best version of St. Louis City SC, and that's why they pretty much got creamed tonight. Let's tell you about one of our wonderful sponsors at My Home Bank. Been just over a month here at STL Sports Central, which means we've been partnered with our friends at Home Bank for just over a year here. Did I say it was just over a month here at STL Sports Central? Just over a year here at STL Sports Central, which means we've been partnered with our friends at Home Bank for just over a year. And we were starting things out here. We knew we needed a trusted partner for our business lending and our everyday banking, because business isn't just about numbers, it's about relationships. And with Home Bank, those relationships have made all the difference. Home Bank is the team behind our team at STL Sports Central. Visit myhomebank.bank or call 855-577-2001. That's Home Bank, member FDIC, more than a bank. They're your business partner. And our money moment of the game brought to you by Home Bank. I am going to pick a negative one. I can't help it. It's an easy one here. Miggy Perez, the moment we were just talking about, puts it across the face, a beautiful run. I mean, he picks that up in the midfield, takes it all the way to the start of the final third, gets it out to Rafael Santos. They work it back inside to Chris Durkin. Miggy then resets. Great job not being caught off sides. Gets to the byline, puts the crossover, and one of the best opportunities I think Simon Bescher in his life has ever had to score, and he just unfortunately couldn't. Sometimes the money costs you as well. Home Bank will never cost you. They are our sponsor of our money moment of the game. Check them out at myhomebank.bank. I was getting some Twitter responses to some of the things I put out, and I wanted to see what some people have been saying. As I've said all week, we need to have Berkey to have any hope of stealing a point. He did more than enough to do so, in my opinion. Absolute disaster class on offense by everyone not named Cedric. And nice to see Pompeu. I'm a little biased. Sue me. Hey, I'm a little biased to seeing Marcelio Pompeu as well. Cedric Teuscher did have a nice little game in the end. He also potentially cost City 2 points last week when he also couldn't finish a ball on the tee. So let's try to keep the whole perspective going. Kyle Cusack, we will get it next week. Last week's performance still gives me optimism for a season of improvement. I'll be at my first game next week, so I'm pumped. Yes, just avoid the fact that Charlotte also got pumped this week. Just avoid that and ignore that, and it'll all feel a lot better. On the day for Cedric Teuscher, in just a few minutes of work for him, 27 minutes, he had a progressive pass, 3 progressive carries, had a successful dribble, a shot on target. He covered a lot of ground. He looked pretty solid. It would have been very interesting to see what the first half would have looked like with Seti instead of, I know people are going to say Miggy, but I'm going to say Sangbin, because that's one thing I've really been disappointed with this year is Sangbin just hasn't been that player that we thought he was going to be. He's been good in the press. He's a really active player. He's on the front foot. We like that. But something we talked about at the very beginning of the show was this 3-4-2-1 system and why Miggy Perez was one of the 2 at the top. And it was about him being the connector to the other 10 and the 9. And the other 10 being Sangbin. His job is to consistently press the back line like a second striker. A lot of times when they get into the attack, those 2 players are both playing as forwards on opposite sides of the field. So he needs to essentially be a second striker, maybe create width at times too, if Wallem wants to get inside over on that right little pocket there. Sangbin just hasn't been that effective at getting in that hole consistently. And maybe part of that is not getting the service from the hold-up play from Simon Bescher. That could certainly be it, and I'm missing that. That's always in the cards. But a lot of poor touches that haven't gotten a lot of forward momentum for St. Louis City SC. And I think not having him consistently link up with Conrad Wallem, because Conrad Wallem is one of the most talented players on this team. So when you think about what we've been talking about over on the left side, Rafael Santos and Marcel Hartl, teams are going to give City that high and wide wingback spot. They're going to let him get the ball there. So if you can connect with Wallem and Santos and Hartl, you got to be able to connect consistently, I think, with Wallem and Sangbin Jeong. And that connection just hasn't been there. There's another app. I won't do it right now because it takes a lot of typing. There's another app that you can look up kind of the connections between two players and see what they are. And it actually might be this app, come to think of it. And I just don't think we see anywhere near the connection on the right side forward. I mean, obviously, when we looked at the passing network, they were doing a lot more on the right side. But the actual, in the final third, Conrad Wallem talked about it every time we talked about it in the preseason. His job this year is to be more effective in the final third. That is Conrad Wallem's one real goal this year. Be more effective in the final third. And that just hasn't been a thing. It certainly wasn't tonight. It wasn't their fault. That was the more the game they were playing. But still, part of him being more effective in the final third is the other 10 on that same right side being more effective. And right now, SBJ just hasn't been that extra forward that's been able to press lines alongside Simon Bescher. I think that's why we saw City play a little bit better against Charlotte when Brendan McSorley came in. I think that's why we saw when they eventually made the changes today that they made. I think the actual change, Seti came in for Bescher, I think, actually. And Pompeu. Yeah, it was Pompeu and I'm blanking right now. Where did the subs go? I've lost my connections. There it is. McSorley and Pompeu came in for SBJ and Perez. And yeah, Seti came in for Bescher 6 minutes later. But we could have seen Seti earlier. And I think he really could have worked well in that Sangbin spot, because I know Seti likes to play right in the hole behind a striker. But if he's got to come from any side, I think him coming from the right side is a little bit more comfortable from him. So tonight, they needed to get something going with Santos and Wallem, because those players were the more talented offensive outlets that they had on the field. And they weren't really able to do that. And that's why the offense stagnated. In the second half, after the strong last 20 minutes, the only prayer I think they really had was the press and the counterattack. And credit San Diego, they were able to shut them down. Criticize City, they helped them shut them down because they didn't have a clean touch the entire game. And if you can't have a clean touch the entire game, you're just going to kill every possession you had. And that's what I thought we saw from St. Louis City over and over again, was just possessions dying on the vine over and over again. Last week, City got all over the place wide. Tonight, 5 crosses. None of them were successful. 2 from Conrad Wallem, 1 from Totland, 1 from Rafael Santos, and 1 from Cedric Toyshirt. I'm not the biggest fan of always just going crazy, gung-ho, hit a lot of crosses, but you're playing a 3-4-2-1, and your 2 most talented players, thanks to absences, your 2 most talented players are arguably your 2 wingbacks. Get the ball wide and let them swing crosses into the box. Get Sangbin as a secondary striker or start Seti instead. Get Besher to press the back line and swing some crosses in. Hell, play Timo at striker again. Swing some crosses in. Utilize your best players. That's my final thing. I can't believe I just did 50 minutes solo. My apologies to everyone out there. This was not fair to anyone. You utilize your best players in their most comfortable and effective areas, and you'll play better soccer. I think that's a pretty simple way to put it. City did not utilize their best players in the most effective areas. I could have gotten to that 20 minutes ago. We're going to wrap it up. I appreciate everyone for watching and chiming in the chat. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the chat. Hey, it's over there. Go ahead and leave them in the chat. We'll get to them after the fact. Like, share, and subscribe here at STL Sports Central. Hit the bell button to know whenever we're going live. And that's always going to be after City games, Blues games, Mizzou games, Billikens games, Cardinals games. We're going live after all of them, sometimes immediately after, most of the times immediately after, to get your coverage right to you so you guys can react to what's happening in St. Louis sports. So hit that bell button so you know whenever we are going live. Thank you to our wonderful sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook, where the crown is yours, and Home Bank, the sponsor of our money moment of the game. Thank you again, everyone, for watching and chiming in. Like, share, and subscribe. It's STL Sports Central. Check out the website as well. We got Bernie Miklas. He kicks ass. Check out the YouTube. Go into the videos section. See all those Bernie videos. Check under the live section for all past post games. That's all I got tonight. Have a great evening, St. Louis.